It's time to play America's favorite game. What's Even Marketing? With your hosts, Jake and Paul.
Hey everyone, welcome back to What's Even Marketing, the only game show where we wonder openly about marketing and what it even is.
That's right, Jake. Marketing has changed so much even in the last 15 minutes that we can't keep up with it. Content, advertising, thought leading, client service, influencers, bus shelters. Apparently all that is marketing. Really?
Paul's right, everyone. That's why we're going to kick things off today on What's Even Marketing and talk about the darling of the content marketing world right now, podcasts.
Jake, what if I told you you could create subscription-worthy marketing content that has 10 times the engagement of a blog post and expands into new marketplaces 24 hours a day?
Well, I wouldn't believe you, Paul.
Or what if you could create content that people wanted to spend time, go on walks with, fold laundry to?
Again, I just don't believe it, Paul.
Well, what if I told you today how to start your own podcast?
Well, I'd say let's get to it.
Deciding to start your own podcast is a great idea. Or is it? In the process of launching the LAWsome podcast for Consultwebs, we learned what it takes. And it takes a lot more than we thought.
The suggestions made here are based on our own research and preferences. For each suggestion, there are more expensive options, and indeed, there are cheaper ones. We encourage you to do your own research and find solutions that fit with your own preferences.
Because we love enumerated lists, here's 5 areas to focus on when starting your own podcast. Pre-search. Content. Creative, distribution, and number 5, hardware and tech. Pre-search.
Starting a podcast is a good idea, but it'll be just another short-term fix if you don't have a strong reason and you research your audience. What we did with the podcast was really focus in on the purpose for the podcast. We identified a specific narrow audience, and then we installed business goals before we did anything.
Well, and that's important because a show you make for one audience will be different for a different audience. And if you look at even just demographics or anything like that, something that might be interesting to 25-year-old college students it's going to be an entirely different show for, 45-year-old entrepreneurs. So,
right.
I mean, that's a stark difference, but you need to dig deep. I think that's what we're trying to say here, right? Like, do your audience research and where, like, how do we do that? I know what we did, but I mean, what advice do you have for people to go and find out what's your audience? How do you find that audience?
So you go into your intake, go into your case loads right now and figure out the zip codes where people are living. What's the demographic, makeup of your most valuable client at your law firm? And think about, what comprises the majority of your caseload. And then that type of audience would require what type of content and where would they even get it? Because podcasts are great, but there's a certain demographic that listens to them and prefers them. So if your specific valuable client base isn't necessarily matching the type of demographics that occasionally or that most not matching the demographics that listen to podcasts the most, which is overwhelmingly white, male, young, entrepreneur types, so if you're an IP lawyer, it's great. Now, if you're in personal injury, then you say, well, everybody's my client,
right. Everybody gets into car accidents. We hear that a lot. And
so,
that's a fair point.
So here, what would you say to them if they're saying that everybody is my audience? What would you think maybe their goal would be more important then? Like,
right. Well, I think you touched on it earlier, is that's where you have to do that purpose. And you have to say, well, if everyone there, then I need to do something to make myself relevant in a larger way. So I think that would be more of a brand awareness thing. And that might be something where you would, and we'll talk about this more in the next section about content, but you would want to sponsor something in the name of the firm that would then be useful for everyone, but still, have that brand reinforcement in there.
You're
right?
talking about a branded podcast,
Sure.
like something that's separate. Or you could use the podcast as a chance to establish yourself as an expert.
Sure.
There's a chance for you to, just like you said, get involved with your local community. There's a lot of different ways your podcast can reach out. But what you need to be cognizant of in this first idea is who's going to be listening to it and what type of action do you want your audience to take? Are you just going to be providing hot takes? Are you asking them to enter into a relationship with your law firm in some way? Is it a brand play, just like Paul was saying, or is it something more direct? And then think of how you listen to podcasts and then what you enjoy from a podcast. And then think of how you can maybe take your marketing content and serve an audience. Yeah. So anyway, finalize this. You got to do pre-search, create a powerful purpose for your podcast, identify specific and narrow audience, and install business goals before you record anything.
Content. So talking about content, let's move on to that. Number 2 on the list. What will you be saying? How will you say it? How will you pitch it? You and I went through this, man, over and over, back and forth. This may be one of the most difficult parts of doing the whole thing.
Yeah, because, we came in thinking we would just be talking. And it was like, well, who can talk? Who's funny? Well, maybe we're funny, and then you realize, hold on, that isn't enough. I'm flattered that we get to blather, but really, how can I provide value with this content to the audience? That's what Paul kept on hitting it was, okay, well, think about the audience. How are we going to deliver value for them in the show? His ideas was the one takeaway that you can have, hooking up with people who can make people, hooking up with professionals and legal experts who can help lawyers be better at running their firms, be better at marketing their firms, just be better in general. But it was all for the audience. Let's make sure the audience gets as much value out of this as possible. We had to keep adjusting it. It was like, oh, it's a radio show. Well, no, it's not really a radio show. It's just an interview. Well, maybe they want to have some topical stuff involved. So back and forth, hitting it up and down, getting involved in the production of the show, like the format. Where do we break for things?
Yeah.
In a blog post, you can see how long you have, but in a podcast, you don't know how long you're committed to. So you need to use signposts and say, coming up, we're going to do this. Coming up, it's this. You have to really start thinking about the way you present the content in an audio fashion. I just remember those being key come-to moments that I had.
Yeah, I remember that too. And the format was a big thing. And I think what we really learned from there is that, just like you were saying, oh, we could talk, we can be funny. And I'm sure a lot of lawyers, they're like, hey, I
talk all the time.
I can talk.
Right.
That's fine. But you need a framework. You need to give yourself some parameters that you can work in. And what we really learned too is that it's a courtesy for your listeners to give them those signposts,
right,
as part of your show. And that was really the biggest thing, was that format. There's a lot of different formats. Ours, we stick with the interview with an expert. So we always kind of have our show follows a very specific pattern.
Oh yeah,
and we did that on purpose.
Yep.
But there's definitely other formats. And I mean, Jake, you came up specifically with some of those more brand sponsored shows. I think where the one example I always throw out is the Lone Ranger, brought to you by Ovaltine, from back in the day when it was all radio shows. But I mean, Jake, it's limitless, isn't it?
Oh man, well, you could have a show that stands aside and is just entertaining, and it's about legal issues, or maybe it's about lawyers, and lawyers are the heroes. It doesn't necessarily have to be about your firm. Maybe it's just interesting about the law, or interesting about local culture, or maybe it's a more dramatic presentation of legal issues, or maybe there's, investigative journalism angles that you can take, cold cases. It really is limitless. And with good sound design and good music and a good production value, podcasts are quickly becoming this sort of way to escape, way to entertain. We're excited to explore those things, but it just has to be worthwhile for the audience. And then it has to smack of value. I like being creative, but I don't like the audience leaving empty handed. And that's you keep hitting the hammer on that. What does the audience get out of this? Great that we're doing this. What will they take away? And that's another thing with content, is building towards the end. Build towards the end, make it something useful, really kind of care about the arc of it, keep the listeners there, engage them, because podcasts are this place where you get to share an experience, and if you respect folks and then you give them the time, but you got to do that with great editing, good post-production. I mean, it's huge. People don't want to hear you talking on the laptop mic. People don't want to hear you just rattling it off. Oh, it's great. You can just sort of, boom, there's a, poop out a podcast. People want respect, and you have to respect their time. That's what Paul said earlier on. We have to respect their ears. And we say that a lot, but
and we're going to dig deep in that in the tech and gear section, but to get to your point about getting to an end or having some kind of ask or a give or whatever sales catchphrase you want to put in there. To get specific, we actually used a spreadsheet. We actually took a spreadsheet and laid out all the different segments of the show. And I really highly recommend, maybe you're not a spreadsheet person, maybe you're a, mind mapping thing or whatever, but lay it out so that you can see, front to back. And honestly, you may be better off starting at the end and working backwards. Whatever you work, but don't just freestyle. That's, I think, a huge failure of a lot of podcasts is people just start rambling, and 30 minutes into it, they start making a pitch, and they've never told a story to get you to there. So that's important. But then once you have that, for us, it was different because we knew we were going to do this. But in the case of a law firm, who's doing it? The lawyer's doing it. Is it going to be the marketing director? Do you have someone with a great voice? Like, is your intake person awesome? And then stuff, and Jake, I'll let you run with this part, but just talking is okay, but this isn't a phone conversation. You're trying to create an experience. So
entertaining.
It's something that really opened my eyes that you really brought to it, was this whole other dimension.
Well, music and sound design and incorporating jingles and
Widgery-do, the perfect widget for you.
It comes naturally to me because, I'm a musician and a composer, and I've done a lot of sound design. But it has been something that the audience has mentioned time and time again, that, wow, this is really, it sounds great. It sounds professional, which is nice. But you want to have something that people come away saying, wow, you made that. That's the sort of idea that I'm always trying to go for, is that's really cool. And always that extra little touch. If you put it in there, people really respect it. You can't do it in any other format. Like video, video's there, music's sort of there. But music and sound design in podcasts is just a really great marriage. And it's something that you can educate and entertain with and, have fun. But so main point here, content. It's what you're going to be saying, how you'll say it, how you're pitching it, what it sounds like. Get the words right first. Speak them aloud. Feel it as it fills the world, because things that look good on paper maybe don't sound good in the air. So make sure you focus on the content and how it sounds.
Creative, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Jake,
Okay.
because you absolutely ran with this. I was really, more of a I like this, I don't like this, I think this is good, I don't think this is good kind of thing. But you really, really ran with this, and I think it's important. One thing I would like to point out, um, that I know took a lot of time for us, and I think is important, and I can see it now after 2 years. I can see how it's paid off. Is being consistent, having the
Mm-hmm.
same look and feel,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of vibe on all the different stuff you put out, whether it's a white paper, an art card, a Twitter
Yep.
post. Anything has this same kind of look and feel to it.
Right.
I think that really, um, it sets you apart from someone who's just blasting up their, whatever SoundCloud link or anything like that. But
Right.
I mean, Jake, what went into that? I mean, seriously, man, I know it took a lot of time. I know there was a lot of, back and forth on that, but
Well,
it
well,
turned
the
out
back
well.
and forth is critical. I mean, if somebody was on Twitter, a lawyer was like, I'm having someone design my logo. I'm having someone design my logo, and they're asking for $30,000. Is that a lot? And a lot of law firm owners were like, no, like that is the cost for creative. Or you could go on to Vistaprint. A lot of this stuff is so easy, but people are very aware of consistency, but they don't know how to fund it. And so that's why a lot of this stuff that people pay for just comes free with me because, design, graphic design, I'll go into Canva and mess around, for a long time. I know there's other lawyers that do this too. Erin Levine talks about making videos for her law firm. She talks about using Canva. Jess uses Canva.
Justy.
A lot of folks,
Yeah.
So Dina Eisenberg, I mean, everybody gets down with Canva, but they all realize one thing is that consistency and reliability is this currency that you can't afford to cheapen by not doing it to the best of your ability. Coming up with a great title for this for the podcast. We've gotten a lot of kudos for that. Me and you went through 100 different titles, trashed 100 different things. I mean,
No joke, no joke, folks. We had a document. I could probably find it somewhere that is just a list of probably 100 names.
Yep, and then we had 10 different designs that we went back and forth. But once we had it, that was the template for everything, for all the videos, for all the distribution sites. So getting that logo together, getting the show art, getting your art cards together, figuring out where you're going to be showing up in social media, because Instagram doesn't look like LinkedIn, doesn't look like Twitter, doesn't look like Facebook, doesn't look like, all of these things. You have to get the right sizes for all this stuff. And if you're not careful and you don't care about the detail, it ends up looking like you don't care and you don't care about the details. A lot of people don't want to do content marketing or a podcast, or they want to do it, and then they only do it a little bit, sort of like an art project at your house. It's like a really great puzzle that you started. It's like a really amazing, I just sanded the first half of that bench, Nobody wants to go all the way through because consistency feels like hard because you're trying to do it brand new from the beginning every time you engage with it. If you set up a good template, get a good logo, get something reliable and consistent, you don't have to waste your mental energy thinking you need to recreate the wheel. You make a good wheel template, pour the mold in there, and set it and forget it. That's my concept around creative stuff is,
oh man,
let me get to a good template.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, but that's it. Let me get to a good template and then we can rock it.
Well, and it goes back to what we were talking about doing your pre-search and brand identity. I mean, that's effectively, what you're doing. That's what we did. We created a brand. And all of that goes into that. And creativity, it's there is a certain amount of inspiration but there's also a lot of just knuckling down and getting your hands dirty in Photoshop, getting working out, writing down 100 ideas that 90 of them you're going to throw out. You have to be okay with that.
To that point, man, one thing that this podcast has taught me, and one thing that I appreciate more than ever working with Consultwebs too, because of their content department, is drafting and edits. I used to not love that. Like, I used to just want to show up and bang it out and, boom, I'm done. Oh, yeah, the first stroke is the genius one.
Yeah.
And really, the truth is, if you take time and go back and listen, because you're going to listen to yourself if you do a podcast, and you're going to hate your voice too, probably. But anyway, you listen to yourself and you have to go back and edit it, clean it up. And I've become so reliant on the idea that I will be better if I prepare more ahead of time and get the draft tight and get it going and then put out a good show, because I think a lot of people don't realize the work that comes into this. I mean, if we're talking about editing, for 10 minutes of finalized, edited, material, it could take 2 hours to clean up and make it look good and remove the breaths and give space and put time in there. And, but if you don't do that, you miss out on an opportunity to connect meaningfully.
Distribution. Talking about having everything all lined up together, and your creative stuff all set up, is an excellent segue into point number 4, distribution. So where is this podcast going to live, and where are people going to find it?
So there's, I mean, how many digital destinations is available here? Like hundreds of different places for you to put your podcast.
With most, I think we have like 64 that we publish to like automatically. And that's not even counting places where then you have to upload and read, like SoundCloud also publishes to other stuff. So there's a lot.
Oh yeah. So iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher,
iHeartRadio.
So the Android network, all the stuff. iHeartRadio, TuneIn. Xboxes, Microsoft systems, Alexas. Your podcast is going to be distributed to all of these places. How does it look? What does it look like? We use Libsyn. There's a whole bunch of other hosting sites, but Libsyn has a really great way to centralize all the places where you're going to be publishing. You can turn certain episodes on and off. You can see what's live, see what's connected, and then you can also put all the art in there natively to show up, and so it looks really beautiful on all the different channels. I mean, Libsyn is a really, really high quality place to distribute and host your podcast. I mean, I haven't used anything else, so I don't know, and I know it costs a little bit of money, but that's my suggestion as far as distribution. Just go in there and follow their prompts, but don't think that you just go in there and click it and it publishes. To get onto iTunes, it took about 2 weeks.
Yeah, you got to set up accounts and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
You need an iTunes account, you need a Google Play account, you need to set up your Spotify account.
Yep.
It's a lot. And really, just to, distribution this here is just something that you're going to have to kind of figure out. We don't have a ton of advice for it, because every single person that we went to said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. We went to people who already had podcasts, who had experience with it. Everyone said Libsyn, go there. Just use them. Everything else is number 2 and below. This is where you want to go if you're serious.
Right. And so there might be something out there that looks clean and feels better and, is cheap and whatever. You can do that. But Libsyn is so comprehensive in all the different places that it publishes to that I wouldn't take any chances.
Yep. And number 5, hardware and tech.
This is probably the most important part, but it's something that people just don't think about, because everyone has a mic. Everyone has headphones, you know?
Because I had stuff from, back when I was in bands. I had like I have a 58 SM58.
Right. The
Which is
workhorse
like,
mic.
it's a good all-purpose mic. I mean, it can, hey, I'm not throwing shade on a 58, man. I mean, those things,
It's a good one.
They can take some abuse. So if you're, accident or violence prone, that's your choice.
It's the punk rock. It's the punk
Yeah.
rock microphone. But people are getting just a USB mic or something. What you need to focus on is getting a cardioid condenser microphone. So it's the kind of tall looking black ones, and it isn't the one with the little round end. You want something that can capture the resonance of your voice, that's big enough to transmit a hearty sound, because really everything gets lost and crunched down to ones and zeros at an MP3, which is the sound files that most podcasts are hosted at. You really want to have a good capture, because that's where the most of the magic happens. Everyone thinks you can do stuff post-production, but you really want to record strong in the beginning. So what we have is pop filters, condenser microphones from Audio-Technica, baffles, and then we go in to both Paul and I have interfaces and compressors that we plug our microphones in that power them. And then it goes into audio workstations within our computer. So you have to start thinking, you're going to be capturing audio. So are you going to be using GarageBand? Are you going to be using Logic? Are you going to be using whatever, digital audio workstation that your podcast hosting service is offering? The magic is in how you control this. I mean, this is how sharp your knives are. This is how clean your kitchen is, how cold your fridge is. This is all the tech and tool stuff that will make a better tasty meal if you take it seriously. But the point is this is the last thing you've done. The first thing you've done is found a great audience. Then you have focused the show and figured out what it's going to sound like, where it's going to be, who's going to be hosting it, what it's going to look like, and then where it's going to show up on the internet. And then you have this microphone, and now you'll feel better about spending $100 or so on a microphone,
which is not much. And
it isn't.
It was very eye opening for me. Again, I had my last experience home recording was years ago when digital was just coming out. So not a ton, and I took a lot of advice from Jake. And if you go back and listen to the show, I started off with just a headset mic, like for meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the SM58 because I had it. And then I upgraded to this AT2020, which is what I'm using now. It's unreal. Like it's just like having that. It almost gives you that confidence. It gives you that, I am now a recording artist kind of thing, which I mean, it's, I know we're not making records here, but you get up for it and it pays off. I mean, this is not a ton of money you have to spend to do something that will separate you from every single podcaster who's out there using their iPhone or using a headset mic.
Yep.
It's unreal. I can't recommend it enough. Get a quality microphone, get a quality interface. Like Jake mentioned, Logic, some of these tools that you need to actually, record and then transfer, make that MP3. They can be complex. They can be easy. They can be, if you, like you said, GarageBand. I've used GarageBand a lot.
Audacity is the one that everybody uses.
A lot of people use Audacity. It's very simple,
completely free to use. Very, very comprehensive.
But tell me though, so we have these things, we have these tools, but something that you bring to it, Jake, that I think I don't hear a lot on other podcasts is that these tools really come together in your hands, and there's an art to mixing and mastering. There's a skill here that just having the hardware isn't quite enough. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I appreciate that, and there is something about the way sound is reproduced if you're thinking about how strong the sound needs to be throughout the whole episode, how maybe you might need to fade things in and out, how maybe this person didn't pronounce this S appropriately. So now I have to go and find another S somewhere in their dialogue. So it's sort of like it turns into an Easter egg hunt, an Indiana Jones kind of like break the code. But you also have to pay attention to the space and pauses that you can create. A lot of American Life is just pauses. I mean, there's probably a show, an American Life episode where it's just one giant pause. They take the grand pause very seriously on NPR and those shows because it resets the listener. So you have to start thinking, I'm not only going to be presenting this stuff, but I also have to, kind of show it off and display it, and share in the presentation of audio. So you're right. You have this material, you have this tech, but you also then have to have this finishing touch. And knowing that if it doesn't sound good, it doesn't matter. People just won't listen. You have to respect people's ears and time. They're choosing to listen to a podcast versus YouTube or Netflix or listening to music, which is way better quality, guaranteed, than what you're creating. So you have to think, how are you competing here? You can't disappoint these folks. So be entertaining, really take it seriously, and that stuff will pay dividends if you respect your audience and give them a performance that's worthy also of that microphone that you have. I mean, I totally agree with you, Paul. When you have a pop filter and a nice condenser mic, it just feels like you're doing something, versus hiding in my closet on my iTunes, earpiece.
That feels like you're doing something too, but that's different.
That's a completely different podcast. You don't share that stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, man. So, I think we've run through the 5 points there.
Yes.
But that's not it. That's not it. If you get those things right, and you launch your podcast, that's not the end of it. There's ongoing things, and we can go back and forth on these a little bit. I'm sure everyone's going to have a message, a different list, I would say. One thing I was blown away though, and you brought it up before, how much time does this take?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jake, talk about, some of the edits, some of like the Bob Ambrogi episode we did, the Jess Birkin one, your Christmas Carol, the musical. I mean, this isn't just, hit record and then when you're done, upload it. Am I right?
No, it takes a long time. I mean, to book the show, book the guests, to record it, to create the music, to edit it, we've figured it out. It's about 20 hours. It's a long time for a 40-minute show. Mm-hmm. So you have so much time dedicated to creating this thing. You have to make sure you have the bandwidth to accommodate for it. I wouldn't know what to do if we didn't give ourselves lead time. One thing that I think is really important is that we recorded a couple episodes ahead of time and had them in the bag. So you're not scrambling to publish that day or the day of your recording, or, because I'd rather take time, make sure it looks good, and publish it and wait for it to publish it ahead of time, rather than publish it when I need it. So that's one thing that I think people really need to pay attention to is, one, it takes a long time to edit these things. Two, you should have enough to release some shows ahead of time so you're not scrambling to keep up with your schedule, because it can get really scary. I mean, there's nothing more terrifying than hitting publish on a podcast, because I've had it where I missed a couple edits. It was the Jane Reardon episode.
Yeah, I remember.
I published one, and I had accidentally done a global edit on one of the tracks that cut out half of her answer to a question. So I ask this question, and then there's this giant silence, and then I laugh, in the middle of nowhere. And I was listening to it on a walk, and I was freaking out because it had just published. So I ran back home, quickly went in, adjusted it, re-uploaded it, and transferred it within, a couple hours of it. But I was completely embarrassed, and it was a shock. No content behaves that way. So you have to make sure you have somebody who knows how to handle the content when it misbehaves,
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of this, we're talking, we work in marketing. I mean, this is, let's be honest, this is part of what we do. And it is, like we talked before, it's part of content marketing for us, on a certain level. It also, it has some creative and other aspects, but this is a dollars thing. And I think you need to be, aware of that when you're sitting down to this. You wouldn't sit down with a client or a prospect or somebody that was, looking for legal services, and not charge them if they were in your office for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be in your office for 2 hours. And that's not, so it's, so you got to keep that in mind. I mean, there is an investment, even if it's not, you're going to have to buy a mic. You're going to have to, sign up for hosting and stuff like that. But I mean, there's an ongoing real investment that you have to make into this. It's, like we're trying to say, it's not just talking into a mic and uploading it to the internet. You know what I mean? There's an ongoing thing you have to do.
It's a commitment to the audience, though. That's the whole thing that underpins it. If you have a good focus on your audience and know what they value, then it's easy, and you can keep going back and delivering good, content that's worth their time.
But you have to be consistent, because that goes back to what we were saying before, those signposts, those heads ups. If you tell someone every week, you better show up every week.
Let's wrap it up. Your podcast is a content experience that your audience can subscribe to, that can continually remind them of your value, that can be introduced into their lives again and again. But it only happens with consistent publishing schedule and dependable production. Too many marketing strategies these days are just haphazard, intermittent, and mostly text-based. I wrote a blog post. I did a press release. I did a newsletter. A branded podcast, an audio experience that commits you to a schedule. You can regularly promote your firm. You can show up for an audience that is subscribing to it. And then you can actually speak in a voice for your brand rather than having others speak for you. How do we wrap this?
I'll tell you how we wrap it. Here's what this all boils down to. It's this. The dream for every law firm owner is to create awareness for their practice, generate new clients, and increase caseloads. So your law firm's chance to establish an intimate connection with your audience, like we've done with LAWsome, create content that actually speaks to your client demographic, and build your reputation as a trusted expert is possible through sound principles of a branded podcast. We're here to tell you we can make that happen. So go to consultwebs.com to learn more about our new podcast production service, or reach out to us directly here at LAWsome.
But any questions, we are here as a free source of advice. Don't feel like you're alone. I've already given a ton of great free advice for folks who wanted to start their own podcast. We're here. And if you want to make something real banging, get in touch with us and we could take it to the next level. But, this is what we love to do. And I think it's a brand new opportunity for marketing to present in this audio world. I mean, I'm really jazzed about it. So just to have a chance to do it for Consultwebs has been good. So if there's a chance we can do it for your law firm, let's get in touch.
For show notes, links, and info, go to thelawsomepodcast.com or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. Be sure to leave us a review and rating in iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawsome.